Everyone, this is Azucena Ugarte. This is Azucena Ugarte. Currently, I am the Director of Prevention, Education, and Technical Assistance at Women Against Abuse. You may be familiar with Women Against Abuse. It is the biggest domestic violence organization here in Philadelphia. And what we are doing today is recording a webinar about intimate partner violence, specifically for professionals or staff at Nationality Services. The idea of this webinar is to review the general dynamics of intimate partner violence, some appropriate responses when you find out that a person that you are working with or a family that you are working with is experiencing abuse or experiencing intimate partner violence. Before we start, I would like to say a couple of things about language. You are going to hear me using the term intimate partner violence. Some people prefer to use domestic violence. I'm specifically using intimate partner violence because this webinar is focused on the abuse between partners, regardless if they are married, if they are in a same-sex relationship or in a heterosexual relationship, if they are living together or not, and includes also, in the case of intimate partner violence, includes former partners. Maybe you're working with somebody who is being still abused or harassed or stalked by a former partner. The other term that you're going to hear me using during the webinar is survivor, and sometimes I'm going to use both victim and or survivor. The domestic violence movement prefers to use the term survivor because it's more empowering than the term victim. But when I'm saying survivor or victim what I'm referring to is somebody who is being abused by their partner or former partner. That said, let's start with the webinar. Just one little warning that we provide every time we talk about these topics is that even though you are here as a professional to learn about the general dynamics of intimate partner violence, this phenomenon or this issue is so common that chances are you know somebody in your personal life that has experienced it. So what we would say is take care of yourself while you are listening to the information, and if at the end of this webinar you feel that you need to talk to somebody because you're anxious or angry about the topic, please look for your supervisor and look also for resources that you have in your personal life. So let's start with this. The first thing we're going to do is see what things you already know about this topic. This is probably not the first time that you hear about this topic. There are movies about intimate partner violence and domestic violence. So people think they know things, and you may know some things. So let's compare. Let's see what you think. So for example, domestic violence or intimate partner violence happens when partners don't get along and argue all the time. Some of you may think that this is true because when some people argue, the relationship escalates and then that leads to violence. Some people may say, yeah, but not all the time. Not all arguments lead to violence. You may have a healthy relationship in which people argue because relationships are difficult and they require a lot of work. On the other hand, you may have a couple that when you see them from the outside, it looks like they get along really well, they never argue, they get along, and then you realize that they never argue because one of the person in the relationship is so scared of the other one that they actually never say what they really want, what they really think, or what they really need. Okay? So even though some people confuse arguing or even fighting, not getting along with intimate partner violence, It is not about fighting. It is not about getting along. It is not even about being physically aggressive. Intimate partner violence, it's about power and control. Intimate partner violence is about one partner having power and control over the other partner. And the way in which the abusive partner gains and maintains that power and control could look different in every relationship. We know that there are different types of abuse that allow that person to gain and maintain that power and control. Most people focus on the physical violence. There are other ways in which this person can gain and maintain that power and control, and that's one of the main objectives of this webinar, is to talk about those dynamics. Let's see what you do with the next one. It says, usually, the abuse does not stop when the victim survivor leaves the abusive relationship. What do you think? True or false? Some people say, yes, of course it's going to stop. You are not in that relationship anymore, so that person cannot abuse you. Other people are going to say, that's what you think. What actually happens is when you have an abusive partner, even when you try to leave and try to stay away from them, they are going to still try to keep that power and control over you. One of the things that we see after separation is that stalking becomes more often or more intense. And one of the big tools also that an abusive former partner can use to try to get back into the life of the survivor or victim is custody of the children. Because even if your partner has been abusing you, your partner still has rights over their children. And the last sentence that we have here is, if an abused partner, that means the victim or survivor, stays in the abusive relationship, it's because she or he actually likes to be abused. I hope that by the end of this webinar, everybody is going to have a clear understanding of why some people stay in an abusive relationship, why they either don't have any ways to get out, or sometimes even when they have ways to get out, they decide to stay. And I'm really hoping that at the end, you realize that none of those reasons are related to liking the abuse. Nobody likes to be abused. Nobody likes to be humiliated, punched, kicked, make fun of. There are other reasons that keep that person in that relationship. In the case of your work, some of those reasons may be cultural norms, and we're going to review some of that information too. So after this little introduction, what is actually intimate partner violence? It is a pattern of behavior, so it's not an isolated incident. It's this person trying to gain and maintain that power and control over their partner once and again in different ways using different tactics. It is, as I mentioned, about gaining power and control. It is lethal. People get killed because of intimate partner violence. Children get killed or hurt because of intimate partner violence. And it's common not only because it happens really often. According to the Center for Disease Control, 35.6% of women in this country have been physically attacked, sexually assaulted, and or have been stalked by an intimate or former partner in their lifetime. So it's not only that it's more than 1 in 3 women in this country experiencing that, but it's common because we know it can happen to anyone. It's not a matter of cultural background or religion. It's not a matter of having money or not money or being educated or not. We really see it everywhere. Sometimes because our services are free, we see it more often in one specific population, but that doesn't mean it's not happening in other ones. Something also that is very important to understand the dynamics is the difference between what is just a bad relationship and what it is an abusive relationship. Okay? So in a bad relationship, maybe the two people are arguing all the time, maybe they don't get along, they're mean to each other, or they are together, they break up, they are together, they break up, but they have equal power. And if they have equal power in the relationship, then they can either work together to try to fix this relationship, or at some point, one of them can decide that this is not worthy and that they prefer to end the relationship. When it's just a bad relationship, working together, like for example in couple counseling or couple therapy, it's an option. It's a safe option, maybe an appropriate referral. Ending the relationship, in the case of just a bad relationship, it is a safe option too. It's not necessarily easy option. Breaking up relationships, that's never easy, but at least when the relationship is only bad, breaking up is a safe option. The problem with abusive relationships and the difference with abusive relationships is that in an abusive relationship, one person has the power and the other one doesn't. One person sets the tone for the relationship and the other one complies. And if the person that is being abused doesn't comply, then gets punished by the other partner. When you have a relationship like that, then the two people cannot fix the relationship. The two people cannot work it out, because it's not safe for the person that is being abused to actually say what he or she or they really want from the relationship. For example, if a couple in which abuse is happening goes to couple therapy, the victim or survivor won't be able to say to the therapist what is really happening in the relationship, because the abusive partner is sitting next to them. If they say anything during the session, later on the victim or survivor is going to pay for what they said. It's going to be punished. Okay. So it's very important to understand this, because if you're working with a family and you are sure this is just about relationship, or the family is having a hard time because of resettling in the U.S. and the stressful situations around immigration, then working with the two people at the same time, talking to them about the relationship, even referring them to couple therapy or couple counseling, it's appropriate. That's a good intervention. However, if you suspect this is not only about being in a bad relationship, but what is happening is the result of an abusive relationship, if you suspect it's actually one partner abusing the other one, then trying to talk to the two of them at the same time about the relationship, or referring them to couple therapy, is not going to be successful, is not going to be an appropriate referral, and even worse, it may put the victim or survivor in a more dangerous situation. The other thing that we said is that in a bad relationship, ending or breaking up is a safe option. In the case of abusive relationships, ending the relationship or breaking up is actually the most dangerous time. Most victims of intimate partner violence who ended up being killed are killed after the victim had left or when the victim was getting ready to leave. That's also something very important to remember, because when anybody tells us that they are being hurt by their partner, the first advice people usually want to provide or offer is to say, break up, leave, get your stuff, and get out. And people do not realize that when they say that, even though they're having good intentions, that pressure into breaking up could put the victim or survivor in a more dangerous situation. Instead of telling them they should leave, we're going to see it's a better approach is to ask them, what do you need? So to understand how somebody can gain this power and control and maintain this power and control, it's important to review the different types of abuse. In this case, we are we're grouping all the different examples in 4 categories. One is the physical abuse, the one that most people are familiar with. Then we have the emotional, psychological abuse, the economic abuse, and then the sexual abuse. Some quick examples of physical abuse: restraining. That could mean somebody grabbing you and not letting you leave the room or locking you inside of the house. Of course, the pushing, hitting, punching, kicking, etc. We see sometimes other examples that are not so obvious, which is, for example, controlling medication. If one of your clients or participants has a medical condition and is their partner the one who controls the medication, that gives so much power to that partner and is not going to leave necessarily bruises or marks that people may recognize as a sign that abuse is happening. Another example is strangulation. And in the case of strangulation, that is an indicator of high lethality, which means it's an indicator that this relationship could end up with the victim or survivor being killed. It's very important if a person tells you that their partner strangled them, or if they use the word choking, that you tell them that you're concerned about that it is an indicator of lethality, and that they probably need some medical help or healthcare. We can also talk about that. And of course, every time weapons are involved in incident, specifically every time guns are involved in an incident, that's an indication of high lethality too. Part of physical abuse could also include destroying property, like destroying the cell phone, so you cannot ask for help, or property that either have a financial value or emotional value. And something that you will see also is that there are some examples of abuse that could land in any of these categories: the physical, the emotional, the economic, or the sexual abuse. Some examples of the emotional psychological abuse: threats to hurt the partner, threats to hurt the children, threats to hurt the pets if there is a pet in the family, but also threats to hurt themselves. It could be the abusive partner telling the victim or survivor, if you leave me, I'm going to kill myself. And that's another way in which this abusive partner keeps that person in the relationship. Part of the emotional or psychological abuse is also the put downs and the name calling, telling them that nobody would love them, that nobody's going to take care of them, that they are not good for this, that they are not good for that, etc., etc. Also, the extreme jealousy and possessiveness. Where are you going? With whom? What are you doing there? I don't like when you hang out with people, and don't like when you hang out with another man, even if they are your coworkers, or I don't like when you hang out with another women. I don't like when you change your clothes or your hair, or when you don't answer my phone calls immediately, when you don't answer my text messages immediately. An abusive partner may want to have such a control of the other person that they may ask to have access to all their passwords. And if the victim or survivor tries to establish boundaries, like saying, no, my passwords are private, or you should trust me, usually the response from the abusive partner is going to be, well, you are hiding something. If you're going to show me everything that you are doing, that means you are hiding something. An abusive partner is usually going to accuse the victim or survivor of cheating, for example. The isolation is another strategy. Isolating the victim or survivor for friends, family members, case managers, the community, anyone that could be some kind of support for the victim or survivor becomes a problem for the abusive partner. So they would make up stories, they would just blatantly prohibit the person to go and talk, or even not letting the person have access to the internet so they cannot communicate with their family back home. Moving from a neighborhood to another neighborhood is another way to isolate the victim or survivor. And we have the stalking, which could be showing up, calling constantly. It's an unwanted behavior. It's a course of behavior, so it has to be more than one incident. And that makes the person feel either scared or emotional distress. So when my partner calls me again and again and again, or my ex calls me again and again and again, and that starts to interfere in my life, now we're talking about stalking. Not just about being needy, but we're talking about stalking behaviors. And stalking is an indicator of high lethality as well. And then we have the economic abuse. This is a type of abuse that sometimes people do not think of, but it provides practical power to the abusive partner and could become one of the big obstacles for somebody to leave the abusive relationship. You have some dynamics right there, or some strategies like preventing the partner from working or studying, and that could be telling the partner that they just cannot work, or getting the partner fired from their work by showing up and making scandals, not letting the partner actually go to work, picking up a fight every time the partner has to go to work, or ruining the childcare arrangements so the partner cannot go to work, stealing money from the partner or resources, using the partner's credit cards, or making or asking for a loan in the name of the partner, not paying bills that are supposed to be paid, and then putting those bills in the partner's name. So do you ruin the credit of your partner, including getting your partner or ex-partner sometimes addicted. And then is the sexual abuse. We consider sexual abuse any sexual act that is against the consent of the person. That could go all the way from rape to touching the person in a way that the person doesn't want to be touched, or in moments that the person doesn't want to be touched. That includes coercion, things like, if you loved me, you would do this, this, and that. Or if you need money for the children, then you have to do these sexual acts. Sex trafficking is included there. Sometimes the trafficker is actually the partner of the victim. And in the case of male abusive partners and female victims or survivors, controlling reproductive health, not letting the woman use birth control, or sabotaging the birth control, or making the woman get pregnant often as a way to keep her in the relationship, or sometimes it's the opposite. Sometimes it's forcing abortions in the woman who actually wants to be a mother. As you can see, all these dynamics can get to this power and control. These are just general dynamics. On top of these dynamics, we could even look into specific dynamics that are related to immigration. So what you're going to have is a client that is dealing with the intimate partner violence, but is also dealing with the immigration system, and with maybe cultural dynamics that already make the relationship stressful, or cultural dynamics that already make the relationship unequal. Okay? Some of the dynamics that we see is that in some cultures, the status of women is below the status of men. So in the moment the relationship starts, the woman is already in an unbalanced system of power. The other thing that happens is in some cultures, when a woman gets married to a man, she goes to live with her husband and the husband's family. And the abuse is perpetrated not only by the husband, but also the in-laws. The other thing that we see is that the abusive partner uses the immigration system against the victim or survivor. So things like hiding their passport, hiding their papers, saying that they already sent the application for the green card and they haven't, or lying about that the papers haven't arrived yet. Especially if the abusive partner is the one that has status, has immigration status, and the victim survivor doesn't, or even making the victim survivor lose their status. And with that comes the threats of, if you try to leave me, or if you call the police, I'm just going to tell ICE that you're undocumented and you are going to be deported. That's not necessarily what happens, but that's the big threat, which is one of the biggest fears for immigrants, the fact of being deported. Okay? So you may have a participant that is dealing with all this. They may come to you because of questions about immigration. And while you are trying to work with them, you realize, oh, domestic violence or intimate partner violence is also happening. And maybe that's the reason why we have problems with the immigration system. Or you realize if we don't deal with the abuse, then the immigration is not going to be solved because this person has no papers, have no control over those papers. We need to figure this out first. So something also that is important for us to understand is that in at least 2/3 of abusive relationships, there is something called the cycle of violence. It's something that you may be able to identify. You have one phase in which the abusive partner actually behaves like the best partner ever. Even if they were abusive 2 weeks ago, now they are wonderful, great, give you everything, they're loving, and they're promising that they never ever are going to abuse you again. However, after some time, the victim or survivor realizes that the partner is again getting moody, cranky, louder. They realize any little thing, this person is going to explode. Some victims or survivors describe this phase as the walking on eggshells moment. That they try to please the partner, they try to avoid the partner. Doesn't matter what they do. There is going to be an excuse for the big explosion or the violent incident. This is the moment in which the worst abuse happens. How the cycle works, though, because it is a cycle, is that after the worst violent incident, after being extremely abusive, the partner becomes that nice partner again and tells the victim or survivor, I'm sorry I did that. It's never going to happen again. I did it because I was stressed out about this, because the children wouldn't cooperate, because you wouldn't shut up. Any excuses. They wouldn't take responsibility for their behavior, but they promise that they are never going to do it again, that they are going to try again to do different things, etc. Something that you may realize working with your clients or participants is that the person that is being abused is going to be probably more open to receive help and to try to change the situation after the violent incident. Because that's when the worst things happen. That may be when you have a participant calling you or a client calling you and saying, I need help. I decided that I want to go to court and get a protection from abuse order, or I decided that I want to leave, or that I want to have counseling, etc. Something that may happen is that you are going to provide all the resources to that person, you are going to support that person in that moment, and next time you check in with them, they may tell you, actually, things are better, my partner changed, thank you so much, but I don't need your help anymore, the thing has been fixed. And it could be very frustrating for you, but it's very important to remember that at that moment, they may be in the seduction or reconciliation stage. Also, something that could help you have perspective in a situation like that is that victims and survivors of intimate partner violence leave and come back, and leave and come back, and leave and come back, an average of 7 times. It takes at least 7 attempts, as an average, for somebody to finally leave an abusive relationship. So you may see that person, you may have hopes that that person is finally going to leave, and then you realize that time later they come back. And you need to remember that that's their process, and it's okay. Some of the effects of the abuse in victims and survivors, I'm going to go over these really quickly. But of course, the physical effects, sleeping problems, eating disorders, difficulty concentrating, addiction, either as a coping mechanism, or maybe the abusive partner hooked the victim or survivor in drugs as a way to control them. Constant STDs or having HIV, AIDS, or not knowing HIV status and not wanting to know, because if the victim or survivor doesn't have the power in the relationship to negotiate safe sex, they may not be able to protect themselves. And even if they get tested for their HIV status, they are not going to be sure what to do with that information afterwards. Of course, physical injuries, unintended pregnancies for similar reasons, dental problems, those are some of the physical effects. You have also psychological, emotional effects like depression, guilt, PTSD, feeling suicidal, anxiety attacks, hypervigilance, low self-esteem, startle easily, isolation, and of course the economic effects. Homelessness, a big one, loss of job, loss of the abuser's income, bad credit, lack of savings, losing immigration status in cases specifically for your participants. Among the effects, there is a whole thing about trauma. I'm not going to spend too much time in this section because you should receive a completely different training about trauma. But what I would like you to pay attention to is that when somebody experiences a traumatic event, that could affect in the way this person is going to relate to other people in the future. Your participants may be coming from countries in which there's already war or a dictatorship or persecution for religious reasons, so they may have been exposed to very traumatic events in their home country. So you have one level of trauma there. And another level of trauma is when those traumatic events are not on the streets, on the community, but are actually at your home. What happens if every time you go back home, you are thinking, this may be the time that I won't survive? What happens if every time you are home and you are anticipating that your partner is going to arrive, you are thinking, I'm not sure if it's going to be safe for me tonight and for my children? So being exposed to all that, it's going to affect your participants and how they relate with you. In the last box, I just want to go over, you may have somebody that tells you a horrible history of abuse without showing that much affection, without even crying. That doesn't mean they are lying. It means that that may be the only way they can actually tell you things that happen without falling apart. On the other hand, you may have participants that something very little makes them either very emotional or very angry, because people who have experienced trauma may have problems modulating emotions. You may have a participant that is trying to tell you the story, and they may remember some pieces very vividly, and other things they cannot remember. So they may remember very vividly noises, things that they touch, things that have to be with the senses. And then when you ask them, well, what your partner was wearing, they just cannot remember. Once again, doesn't mean that they are making it up. That's what trauma, that is what trauma does to our brain. You may have a jumpy person that is always hyper-aroused or hyper-vigilant, and any noise, any sudden move may set them off. A person that doesn't trust people and systems, somebody that tells you, I know you're trying, but this is not going to work. Somebody that feels completely hopeless. Somebody also that stays out. You are trying to get the story right, you are asking questions, and the person suddenly is just watching through the window and is not present anymore. And part of modulating emotions, but this is kind of a different level, it's when the brain gets triggered and just skip phases. So instead of going from calm to alert, goes from calm to terrorize. And you may need some time to de-escalate this person or let them de-escalate themselves. So why is it so difficult to leave an abusive relationship? This is the question that everybody asks. Why they don't just leave? Well, there are various reasons, and very valid reasons. One of the main reasons is the fear. The abusive partner is telling them, if you leave me, I'm going to find you and I'm going to hurt you. And not only you, but also the children, your family, your mom, etc. So fear is the #1 reason. Remember, also, we mentioned that leaving an abusive relationship is the most dangerous time. Another main reason is finances or economic autonomy, especially if there has been financial abuse and the victim survivor has not been able to work to save any money. Then how are they going to live, where they're going to go, how they're going to pay for their children. And in the case that the victim survivor is an undocumented immigrant, then their options to actually get a job may be even smaller. Another main reason is the children. A lot of people are going to consider that children should have the two parents. Some survivors say, well, my partner is abusing me, but is really good with the children. The children love this person, or this person is a really good provider. We have a good house. My children have everything that they need. If I leave, then how I won't be able to provide the same things for my children. Something to remember, though, is children could be the reason for staying in a relationship, and at some point, they may become the reason for leaving. Once the survivor realizes that even though the children are not being targeted by the abusive partner, they are still being affected by the abuse, then the survivor may decide to leave at that moment, if it's safe. Other reasons, the isolation, so no support, mixed feelings, hope that the person is going to change, love. Doesn't mean that the survivor loves the abuse, but they love the partner. They want the abuse to stop, but they don't want to lose everything. For them, the ideal solution may be that the partner actually changes and stops abusing them, and then they can keep their family, their home, everything. And you are going to hear clients and participants telling you, yeah, this person did these horrible things to me, but I still want the best for this person. Or guilt. The abusive partner has been telling them that they treat them this way because they made them do it. So it may be a husband telling the wife, well, I scream like that because you drive me crazy. Well, I push you against the wall because you wouldn't shut up. Or I did this because you didn't take care of the children. So the person interiorized that guilt and feels like, if I try harder, then my partner will change. Maybe I am the one who has to change, so they would change for me. Also, we have cultural and religious beliefs. In some religions, marriage is forever. You just don't split a marriage. In some cultures, the focus is on keeping the family together, not in what is best for the individual, but what is best for the family. And that could be a big reason for somebody to stay in the relationship. Another reason is nowhere to go. In the case of Philadelphia, there are only 2 domestic violence shelters. It's 200 beds total for the whole city. And it's not necessarily, let's put it this way, some immigrant communities or immigrants, individual immigrants, may not feel that it's culturally appropriate for them. This idea of shelter, living in community with people that do not speak their language, that do not look like them, with food that is not the food that they would usually eat, maybe actually may feel not safe, and they may decide not to go there. And the other thing is, in the case of some immigrant communities, they don't even know these services are available. Okay. Immigration status may be the reason also for staying or for not leaving. And in this presentation, we are not even talking about disability status of the survivor or any of the children, or what happened if this is a same-sex relationship and nobody in the community knows about it, how I can ask for help, where I'm going to be able to go. Something that is really important to remember, and we kind of mention it when we talk about the cycle of violence, is that living is a process. It takes time, it takes attempts, something that may help you to think through this is nobody lives until they are ready. And being ready means different things for different people. Maybe you would leave if you were in that situation, but not your client. And it's very important to remember that and to respect that. So in the case that you are working with a family and you are not sure this is just a bad relationship, or you're not even sure who is abusing whom, something that can help you and differentiate these behaviors is in the case of the abused partner, that's the victim or survivor, they tend to feel responsible. They tend to actually minimize their experience, the abuse or the injuries. They're the ones who may tell you, yeah, my partner did this, but it was not their intention. Yeah, I ended up with a arm broken, but it was just like, it was not on purpose, something like that. Tend to second guess their own feelings and perceptions. So maybe it was my fault. Maybe I didn't do enough. Okay? Tend to worry about or be afraid of upsetting their partner, of course, the fear. They usually focus more on their partner's needs than on their own needs. And of course, remember, their behavior may be affected by trauma. In the case of the abusive partner, on the other hand, they tend to deny their responsibility or minimize their own behavior. Well, I didn't do it, or my partner is overreacting, or yes, I do it, but that's what we do in my culture. That's what my grandparents did. Okay? Tend to be accusative of their partner or others. They made me do it. My partner made me do it. May justify their own behavior, even cheating, based on partners' perceived shortcomings or cultural norms. Well, if my partner didn't do that, then I would have not, etc., etc. Often feel they deserve more or better. And this is an interesting thing. They do not only express anger at the partner, but they tend to be sarcastic and refer to the partner with contempt. That gives you an indication that maybe this is the person that is doing the abuse. So that's a problem. What we can do, how we can respond. Ideally, at some point in Philadelphia, every organization is going to be able to do a screening. In the case of nationality services, we're still working on that. But ideally, we should be screening all of our participants. Just really quickly, some general guidelines about the screening. It has to be in a private space. You have to be very clear about what you can keep and cannot keep confidential. And then you should introduce the question, right? Introduce the question. I ask all of my clients or participants about violence in their relationships because it's so common and could have a large effect in their lives, including on their immigration status. That introduction or introductory sentence is very helpful to normalize the screening. So the person you are talking to does not feel that you are singling them out or you are pretty much telling them they're victims. What you are saying is, I'm asking this to everybody because this is so common and can affect your life in different ways. And then we recommend asking specific questions. When people say, like, are you being abused? Abuse could mean different things for different people, and nobody wants to label themselves as that. But when asking about specific behaviors, you can get a better sense. At this moment in your work, you may not be doing the screening, but during your work, you may realize something is happening, or maybe the person actually comes to you and tells you, listen, I cannot come that often because my partner doesn't let me, or I don't have access to these papers because my partner locked them out and I'm not allowed to have them. So when you do know there is abuse, what you could do? Listen, validate, and normalize. Okay? Let them know that this happens very often, that it's not that they are doing something wrong, okay? But that there is help available and that relationships shouldn't be like that. Okay? Something that we recommend is ask the person what they want. Would you like to talk to a counselor? How can I help you? If you want to get more information, it should be only if that information is going to be helpful for the client. Try not to use why questions because they sound very judgmental. Like, why didn't you tell me about this before? Or why didn't you call the police? That sounds like they should have. Okay? Be aware of your own biases and about your own assumptions about victims of domestic violence or intimate partner violence. Be aware of the effects of trauma that could be affecting memory. Something that remember always is that the victim or survivor know the situation better than you, and they know their community also better. Okay, so they are the ones who should be making the decisions. We should just provide them options. So a way to provide options is one main big option is the Philadelphia Domestic Violence Hotline. The number is going to come up later. But through the hotline, that person can get resources, safety planning, referral, shelter, etc. The hotline uses language line, so they can interpret to any language. On the other hand, also, Women in Transition, Lutheran Settlement House, and Congreso de Latinos Unidos offer walk-in services. So you can offer your client at that moment, would you like to talk to somebody on the phone, or would you like to go and talk to somebody in person? Once the person makes the decision, or they may say, I don't want any of those right now, okay? Just give me this phone number, I may call later, that's okay. But once you provide the option, the person makes a decision, then review those options. So it's like, okay, so you're going to call the hotline tomorrow, or okay, so you told me you are going to go to Women in Transition in a couple of hours. Do just what we call a safety plan, like an immediate thing. It's like, okay, how you're going to get to Women in Transition. If you call the hotline, is your partner going to be able to find out that you are calling? Okay, so immediate safety planning. Is your client safe to leave your office right now? How can they safely call the hotline? In some cases, if this is something that just happened, like, okay, tonight, what is going to happen? Okay. Then once they get in contact with domestic violence services, we take care of doing safety plan with them all the time, especially when there are more dangerous situations like the person is going to leave. We also would do a lethality assessment, like how dangerous the situation is. So what your role is, your professional role, express your concern. Like if you realize there is abuse, it's totally okay to tell your client, I'm worried about you because I can see that this is interfering with your services, because I saw the bruises, and when I asked you, you told me something that did not sound right. I'm worried about you because be very specific for what you are worried about. Don't say because I think you're being abused. It's very specific what things you saw or heard. Connect the client with resources. Empower the client with options. Always leave the door open. Remember, the client may tell you, no, thank you, no, you're making it up, no, I'm okay. That's fine. Or they may take the things and they don't call or they don't follow up with the referrals. That's okay. Always leave the door open. So anytime they want to talk about you, about what is with you, about what is happening, they feel that they can. Also, speak with your supervisor. You don't have to be an expert in domestic violence. You just need to be supportive and get them in contact with the resources. Okay? But always talk to your supervisor about that. At a personal level, identify your biases and triggers. Somebody may tell you a story that specifically triggers emotions on you. It may be a story that is very similar to a personal story of yours. It's very important to be aware of that. Remember, you are not the rescuer or the expert. You don't need to know everything about domestic violence, and you don't need to save this person. I know in situations like these ones, we may want to save that person. We may want to go to their home, pack their things, and take them to a safe place. That is not our role. The person has to save themselves. Nobody is going to save them. The only thing we can do is provide options and support that person through their own journey. Just keep supporting them, keep supporting them. They may go forward some steps, go backwards another step, and we just can, the only thing we can do is support them through that journey. You may not have all the answers. The hotline is not only for your clients, it could be for you. If you're worried about a client and you're not sure what to do, you can call the hotline and talk to us. And it's very important to practice self-care. And that's a different training that you have to have, but it's how you're going to take care of yourself so you don't take home everything that happened at work. To finish, here are some resources. This is the Philadelphia Domestic Violence Hotline. As I mentioned, we use language line, so we can interpret to any language. It's 24 hours. It's toll-free. Any conversation or communication that we have with a domestic violence survivor, it's kept confidential. That includes immigration status. For any of these services, immigration status is not an issue. We are not going to call ICE, or we are not going to deny services because of immigration status. The other organizations that are around the city, Congreso de Latinos Unidos, you have the number there. This is in North Philadelphia. All the services are bilingual, English to Spanish, but they may use also language line to interpret for other languages. Specifically, they provide counseling not only for female survivors, but also male survivors and trans survivors. And they provide counseling for children affected by domestic violence. In the case of Lutheran Settlement House Bilingual Domestic Violence Program, they also provide services for female, male, and trans-identified survivors. And they have a specific medical advocacy program that could be a good way for somebody to receive counseling. If they are not allowed to go directly to Lutheran, they may go to one of the hospitals with the excuse of bringing the children there, and that's a way that they can receive support. And then Women in Transition, that provides counseling only for female-identified survivors, and some specific counseling about intimate partner violence and substance abuse. You have the Women Against Abuse Legal Center that would provide free representation in the case of protection from abuse orders, and also child support and child custody when they are related with DV. We have staff attorneys, but also we have what we call fast-track attorneys who are every day at family court, specifically at the rooms that hear protection from abuse order cases. So if you know a client has a PFA case they are going tomorrow, you can tell them, go look for the Women Against Abuse fast-track attorney there as soon as you arrive. And then other resources, Women Organized Against Rape when there are cases of sexual assault, Menergy, which is a program for perpetrators or abusive partner. That program is for female, male, or trans-identified people, even though the name is Menergy. Philadelphia Legal Aid and Community Legal Services, you're probably more familiar with them. So this is all. Thank you very much for your attention. I hope this information is going to be useful for you. Thank you.